Welcome on back, everybody, or in if this is your first time. This is the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 74, coming to you not live but online. AFLW Finals week number 2 is coming up, and we're going to be looking at everything AFLW Finals. This is episode 74. We're flying through. We're nearly done with AFLW season. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. We have 1 to 2 episodes of the podcast every week on YouTube and Spotify, so go check it out at either of those places. I mean, you're at one of them already. Plenty of other content on YouTube every single week, as well as stuff on social media, so go check it out. All Aussie Rules everywhere. Without any further ado, let's jump into it. Have a look. As we always do, we'll start with looking at last week's games. Week 1 of the finals, the 4 matches, the winners, the losers, everything in between. Then we'll jump into all of the semi-final action. There's 2 matches coming up this weekend on Saturday, so we'll be previewing both of them. And yeah, that will be pretty much this episode. If you don't know who we are here, I'm Jay. I do, as I said, multiple podcasts every week, usually on either AFLW or AFL. We do try to do one of each at the moment. Trade week in the AFL men's season is next week, so there'll be episodes on that on both the podcast and the YouTube channel. There'll be other videos as well, so go check them all out. Let's jump into it. Last weekend we had 4 games. There they are. We'll start off with North Melbourne Kangaroos against the Adelaide Crows, and it was a bit of a cracker. Kangaroos end up winning it 5-8, 38 to the Adelaide Crows 5-1, 31. This was top of the ladder Kangaroos against fourth on the ladder Adelaide Crows. 2 of the best teams, no doubt, throughout the regular season, the home and away season. Kangaroos were by far the top team all the way through. Adelaide showed signs that they're up there as one of the top 3 or 4 contenders the whole way through. They had a couple patches where maybe they let themselves down with some poor kicking and whatnot, but they still finished 4th on the ladder, so they lose this one, but they do fight another day, so we'll be looking at their semi-final shortly. Kangaroos go straight through to a prelim final, so huge for them. Clearly favourites to take out the AFLW Premiership this season. A look at this match. Kangaroos got the first pretty early in the game. It only took roughly a minute into the game before Talia Randall kicked the first. The Crows got the next couple before the Kangaroos got one back just before quarter time to give them a 1-point lead, 13-12 at quarter time. Second quarter, Kangaroos didn't even score. Adelaide got a goal late. Caitlin Gould kicked her second to give them a lead of 5 points before half time. Third quarter was a bit of a back and forward for a little bit. Kangaroos got one, then the Crows got one, then the Kangas got another, and then the Kangaroos got another. So they went into 3-quarter time 10 points up, and then there was only 1 goal kicked in the last quarter. It was Chelsea Randall for the Crows pretty late in the game. There was about 5 minutes to go and still a sniff when they got within 7 points with a few minutes to go, but they weren't able to score again and finished up with a 7-point margin. As always, we'll look at some of the team stats in this one. Kangaroos slightly won the disposal count, plus 13, which is typical for them. Inside 50s was actually won by the Crows here, 31-30, so pretty even overall, but still, Crows are slightly ahead in that. Just poor efficiency in forward 50, not able to create shots, and that's what's probably cost them in the end here. Stoppages clearance work was domination by Kangaroos, 37-24 in clearances. All of that from stoppages. Centre clearances was 6-5, so pretty close there. Those stoppage clearances was just a massive difference. Possession stats here, 130-122 in contested football, and then 131-113 in uncontested. So both contested and uncontested football going the way of the Kangaroos. Turnover game was also won by Kangaroos by 2. Other interesting or important stats, 76 to 77 tackles, so both teams pretty similar. Kangaroos typically the better tackling team of these two, so Crows did pretty well to maintain a level with the Kangaroos in this one. Tackles inside 50 were, I won't say dominated by Kangaroos, but 15 is a pretty solid number. 11 for Adelaide. And that's the team stats. We'll jump into the players. As always, we'll have a look at the multiple goal scorers. Kangaroos only had the one, which was Bella Eadie, who kicked two early in the third quarter. They were the first 2 goals for the Kangaroos in the third quarter. She finished with 2 goals. And then for Adelaide, Caitlin Gould kicked 2, and Chelsea Randall also kicked 2. So they were the multiple goal scorers. There was 4 individual goal scorers, 4 single goal scorers, sorry. Amy Smith, Kate Sherlaw and Talia Randall for Kangaroos, all kicked 1 each, and Danielle Ponta, don't know where I got Porter from, 1 each. I think I was thinking of Collingwood's Alana Porter, I don't know why. Anyway, moving on. Best players? I mean, pretty hard to go past best player on the ground. Maybe, well, at least for Adelaide, was Ebony Marinoff, Coach's Award, Coaches Association Player of the Year. Was she Player of the Game? She would have been close. There was a few Kangaroos that would have fought her for best on ground, but 31 touches, 13 tackles, 5 clearances, always good. Fighting also for that best on ground. The 3 key Kangaroos players, I guess you would call them. Jasmine Garner, 29 touches, 10 clearances and 535 metres gained. Ash Riddell, 34 touches, 9 clearances, 457 metres gained. And Mia King, 24 touches, 12 tackles, 9 clearances. So those 3 all were outstanding for the Kangaroos. Best on ground, any one of those 4 you could make a case for. I think you have to go for probably the Kangaroos, I guess, because they won the game. In the end, which one of them you go for, you could probably argue any of the 3. My gut probably goes Jasmine Garner, just because of that metres gained as well was huge. Other good players, Bella Eadie kicked 2 for the Kangaroos, as we said, from 13 touches. For the Crows, Chelsea Randall, 22 touches, 2 goals, really good. Caitlin Gould, 12 touches, 2 goals. Anne Harchard was solid, probably not at her best, only the 16 touches. She averages about 20 odd, slightly over 20 I think, so a little bit down but still pretty solid performance from her. And that's game 1 of the final series. We move on to the Saturday night game, Saturday evening game. Fremantle Essendon, 5th versus 8th on the AFL ladder this year. I had to stop and think about it. Yes, it was 5th versus 8th. Fremantle win it, 5-6-36 to the Bombers 4-2-26. 10-point margin in the end. Bombers unable to break the streak. The women's team here for the Bombers in finals. 2 years in a row they've gone out, made an elimination final and not managed to win it. They were going in as underdogs here. It is Fremantle in Fremantle. Was always going to be a tough one. But they started well. They kicked the first 2 goals of the game. The only 2 goals of the first quarter, in fact. And things were looking all right for them at that point. 2-0-12 to 0-2-2 at quarter time. The Dockers did manage both the only 2 goals in the second quarter to take a lead into halftime. They then managed the first one of the third quarter. Looked like they were getting control before the Bombers kicked a couple of quick ones through the middle of that third quarter to give them a lead of 4 points going into the final quarter, but they were unable to score in that last quarter, whereas the Dockers managed 2 goals to run over the top of them and win by 10 points in the end. A look at the team stats in this one. Fremantle plus 10 in disposals, plus 10 also in inside 50s, so did control the territory battle a bit. Bombers just couldn't create opportunities. When they did go forward, they just weren't quite being able to get that final kick to hit a target. in the AFLW, you kind of, once you've got it inside 50, you still need to find another target. Typically, not always, but typically a bit more than you do in the men's game, just due to the lengths of kicks, and in the men's game is longer, so makes sense there. And yeah, the Bombers just weren't able to create that last possession cleanly to create a shot on goal. Clearances +7 for the Dockers. Bombers actually won the centre clearances, but the Dockers did win the stoppage clearances by 8, so pretty controlling there. Contested footy was won by the Dockers, however uncontested was in favour of the Dons. Turnover numbers 60-63. Fremantle won that one by 3, so that's a good result for them there. And then obviously a lot more shots at goal, 5-6 to 4-2, so some wasted opportunities for the Dockers. 90 tackles to 76 in favour of the Dockers as well. Bombers not the biggest tackling team typically, so the fact that they lost it by 14 isn't that big of a surprise. 19 tackles inside 50 though for the Dockers. They really had that forward pressure going. They had the ball down their end a lot more than the Bombers did, but still 19 tackles inside 50 is a really good number. And yeah, led them to a good victory. Only single goal scorers in this game, no multiple goal scorers. So we'll start with the Dockers. They won. They had Mimstrom, Runnels, O'Sullivan, Miller, Lally all get 1 goal each. For the Dons, it was Brooke Walker, Emily Goff, Bud Clark, and Daria Bannister with a 1 goal each. Best players, we'll start with Fremantle, as we usually start with the winning team. I think best on ground is clearly going to go to Mim Strom, the ruckman for Fremantle. Just dominated the ruck work. She ended up with 26 touches, 1 goal, 6 tackles, 11 clearances, 441 metres gained, and 55 hit-outs. Yep, you heard that right. 55 hit-outs. An absolute mammoth game, no doubt about it. I think, personally, best on ground. Really good performance from her. She's always really good, let's be honest, but this was one of her better games. Another outstanding performance, or a couple more outstanding performances to go through in this game. Gabriella Newton, also from Fremantle, 21 touches, 20 tackles. She had a 2020 game. That is unreal. So 20 tackles for her. Aisling McCarthy, 20 touches, 14 tackles. Another really good performance there. And then on the other side of the fence, we had Stephanie Kane for the Bombers. 15 touches, 14 tackles as well. So some big tackle numbers. Georgia Nance-Carwin, I almost didn't manage to say her name at all. 20 touches, 11 tackles. So some big tackle numbers, some big disposal numbers, some good hit-out numbers, clearance numbers. They're the best probably 5 players on the ground. I think pretty comfortably you could say that they were the best 5. I think you could go Mimstrom number 1. I think you go Newton number 2, and then probably either Kane or Nance-Carwin for 3rd best, maybe. Either of those. You could argue probably the way of Nance-Carwin, to be honest. But yeah, that was game number 2 of the final series. Bombers eliminated. Fremantle go on to a semi-final of this weekend, which we will be previewing in a few moments' time. Next up, game number 3. It was Sunday afternoon football. It was the other qualifying final, Hawthorn hosting Brisbane, and it was the only game where the lower-ranked team managed to win. The Brisbane Lions travelled down to Icon Park and got a win, 6-2-38 to 4-8-32. She went to the wire, and it was a good game, in all honesty. A bit of fire after the siren as well. A little bit of push and shove, which is not something you see after the final siren too often. So a little bit of not much love lost in this matchup. Be interesting if they do end up meeting again in, say, the grand final, what the emotions would be like. But I think that's pretty unlikely, but you never know. We'll start with I guess, how this match played out. Pretty much goal for goal for the first quarter, and Hawthorn took a 4-point lead, 2-5 to 2-1 into quarter time. Kicked the only goal of the second quarter to be up by 11 points at half time before the Lions finally really got themselves going with some accurate kicking and some good use up forward, kicking 3 in that third quarter, 2 of those to Kathy Spark. To lead by 6 points going into the final quarter, the Brisbane Lions managed to kick the first of the last quarter as well to extend that out. Hawks got one back about halfway through the quarter, but after that, neither team could kick a goal. Both teams kicked 1 point each in the final 10 or so minutes to give Brisbane Lions the 6-point victory in this qualifying final. So they jumped straight through to a prelim final. Meanwhile, Hawthorn get a second chance. They'll be playing in a semi-final this weekend against Port Adelaide. So we'll be checking that one out shortly. Look at the numbers in this one. Brisbane, they won the disposal count by 20. They won the inside 50s by 4. Both teams had pretty average efficiency inside 50, unable to create the shots as well as they would like. Inside 50 numbers were pretty good. 37 to 33 is a reasonable amount of inside 50s in an AFLW game. In fact, right on average for Brisbane, and Hawthorn were only -3 on their average. But neither team really able to create good scoring opportunities from that. That's how games go sometimes. Clearances were dominated by Hawthorn, though, one of the better clearance teams in the competition, +9. +10 in stoppage clearances, -1 in centre clearances for the Hawks. Contested footy and uncontested footy went the way of the Lions. Massive domination, I guess, in uncontested footy, +26. Turnover numbers pretty low for both teams, 55 for the Lions, 57 for the Hawks, so just in favour of the Brisbane Lions there. Tackle numbers were really low, both teams well below their average, 64 for Brisbane, 55 for Hawthorn. And tackles inside 50, 12 for Brisbane, 3 for Hawthorn. 3 is a very low number. 12 is a good number for Brisbane, but only 3 tackles inside 50. Just shows that they didn't have the full pressure on the Brisbane line defenders in that forward 50 for Hawthorn. So maybe something they can work on going forward over the next week or two of their campaign. Goal kickers, 2 multiple goal scorers for Brisbane, Kathy Spark and Dakota Davidson both kicked 2 goals. Single goal scorers for Brisbane, Taylor Smith and Hartiel both kicked 1 each. And for the Hawks, all single goal scorers, Louise Stevenson, Aine McDonough, Mackenzie Erdley and Caitlin Ashmore all kicked 1 goal each. Best players in this one. Who was best player? Arguably could be any one of 20 players, to be honest. There wasn't a massive disposal game. Only one player on the field had more than 20 disposals, and that was Emily Bates with 22 for Hawthorn. She also had 9 tackles, 3 clearances, 305 metres, so she was really good. I guess for Brisbane, Kathy Spark had 2 goals from 14 touches. She was pretty good, arguably up there. Jade Ellinger played one of her better games of the year, 17 touches, 5 tackles, 307 metres gained. Ali Anderson was good, as she always is. Arguably one of the toughest games to pick. Best on ground, in my opinion. Nobody played bad. There just weren't really that standout performances from many players. I'd probably give it to Emily Bates in a losing team, to be honest. She got plenty of the ball, tackled hard, but sometimes best players are on the losing team. That's just the way it is. So that is game number 3 of the final series. We jump into the second elimination final, which was straight after that one, and it was also the highest scoring game of the weekend. It was over in Adelaide. Elimination final. Port Adelaide Richmond. Port Adelaide win it 11-6, 72 to 7-6, 48. What a season for Port Adelaide this has been. They've come from nowhere. I think they lost their first 4 games or something and haven't lost since then. Meanwhile, Richmond, their season started looking really good. They looked like they were going to be a top 4 team for most of the first half of the AFLW season. They fell apart a little bit, managed to finish 7th on the ladder, which was a bit disappointing for them. Missed out on the home final and then get knocked out in week 1 of the finals. So, disappointing end to Richmond's season, but Port Adelaide, it's all systems go for them. And arguably the 2 surprise packets of this AFLW season in Hawthorn and Port Adelaide are going to be playing each other in a semi-final this weekend, so that should be a cracker. I'm really interested in that game as to who will win, because it should be a good one, I think. A look at this game, Port Adelaide kind of controlled it, but didn't control it, if you know what I mean. On the scoreboard I'm talking firstly, before we get into the stats and numbers. First quarter was 20-6, so 14-point lead to Port Adelaide. They were 13 points up still at half time before Richmond kicked the first 2 of that third quarter and looked like they were right back in this one, with 2 goals from Caitlin Grazier to start that third quarter before Port Adelaide managed 2 quick ones and then got another one just before 3-quarter time, just to extend it out to 19 points and make it look really quite difficult for Richmond. Richmond did get a goal in the first minute of the 4th quarter, so it was all of a sudden, maybe they're still in this. But every time Richmond threatened, Port Adelaide had the answer. Ended up winning it 11-6 to 7-6. So 4-goal winners in a high-scoring, pretty entertaining match that from about the 7-minute mark of the third quarter, Port Adelaide controlled from then on. Up until that point, it was certainly anybody's game, though. I look at some of the numbers in this game, plus 6 disposals for Port Adelaide, so not a massive margin there. Plus 9 inside 50s, though. They certainly controlled that area, well above their average inside 50 count, so that's a really good performance from them. Richmond slightly down on their average, just 31. Clearance game dominated by Port Adelaide. It's probably been Richmond's Achilles heel a little bit this season. For a team that has a really good midfield, they've been beaten in clearances quite a lot, and this was another one of those. Plus 15 Port Adelaide won the clearances by, plus 5 centre clearances, plus 10 stoppage clearances. So just controlled that game from the stoppage and kind of controlled the game through the rest of the ground. Plus 16 contested possessions. Richmond did do okay in the uncontested, plus 14. And Richmond didn't turn it over, which was their big thing in this game that probably kept them alive because they weren't winning clearances. But when they had the ball, they looked after it pretty well. Just the 50 turnovers to Port Adelaide's 59. So a really good sign there for Richmond, but they weren't able to convert that into enough scoring opportunities in the end. Tackle count, Richmond was slightly down on their average. I mean, Port Adelaide were a little bit down as well, but it was still plus 8 in favour of the power. 11 tackles inside 50s for both teams. Moving on to the best players. Goal kickers first. A lot of multiple goal scorers in this one. We start with Port Adelaide's goal kickers. Ashley Saint kicked 3. Julia Teakle and Gemma Houghton both kicked 2 each. And then Caitlin Wendland, Levicki, Lamb and Bogue all kicked 1. Meanwhile, for the Tigers, it was Caitlin Grazier with 3, Yasia with 2, Katie Brennan also with 2, and that was all 7 of their goals. Pardon me. Best players on the ground. Kind of similar in a way to the last one, that there weren't, last game, not massive ball winners in this one. However, there were those multiple goal scorers that I think will probably end up being the best players on the ground. Gemma Houghton, 13 touches, 2 goals. Ashley Saint, 16 touches, 3 goals. Katie Brennan, 13 touches, 2 goals. Caitlin Grazier, 10 touches, 3 goals. Arguably, probably the best players in this one. Elise Sharon for Richmond had 22 touches, was leading disposal getter. Mon Conti was a bit down on her usual numbers, just the 19 disposals, averages well over 20. over 25 touches a game, and did have 11 tackles, 4 clearances, but probably not at her best, not at her effective best, in all honesty. Meanwhile, for Port Adelaide, Dowrick, 17 touches was good. Matilda Schultz has been unreal second half of this season. She's one of the big improvers that has really shown for Port Adelaide this year. 18 touches, 20 hit-outs, 8 clearances. Really good performance. And, yeah, then the goal kickers. So that's all 4 games from week 1 of the finals. We'll have a look at how my tips went. These aren't in order of when they played, because when I recorded my tips last week, the games weren't announced as when they were. But we had North Melbourne to beat Adelaide by 10 points. We were pretty close with that, let's be honest. Final margin was 7 points, so that's a big tick for us. We went Brisbane to beat Hawthorn by 5 points, and they won by 6. So we're once again very close. So another good tick for us. And then we went Fremantle by 20 over Essendon. They only won by 10, but still only 10 points off, so not too bad. And then our one wrong one for the week, we went Richmond by 10, and it was Port Adelaide by 24. So 3 out of 4, solid enough. 73 out of 102 for the season is a really solid number in my opinion. I'm doing, not to pat myself on the back too much, because my AFL men's tipping this year was atrocious, but pretty solid numbers there. We jump into semi-final action now. Week 2 of the finals. And there they are, the 2 games, both Saturday. First one is a Saturday afternoon in Adelaide. We've got the Crows versus the Dockers. At Norwood Oval, 3:35 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So therefore, like, whatever that is, 3:05 Adelaide time. Yep, my brain works. Don't question it. Yeah, so that is the first game. Adelaide going in pretty solid favourites. No surprise there. They've been the better team out of these two pretty much the whole season. Fremantle not far from making top 4 in the end from the home and away season. Probably just a costly loss against Carlton really hurt their season at home, which was like in round 6 or 7, maybe 8, somewhere around there. Really hurt their season, but you don't want to write them off in this, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to be a great chance to win, but I certainly won't be ruling them out of it. Previous matchups, they have met this year before. It was in week 2, and Adelaide won it 5-9, 39 to 0-6-6 for the Dockers. That was over in the West as well, so Fremantle home game, and the Crows did win it 33-point winners. Bit of an ebb and flow since that point of the season, though. Adelaide probably not playing as good as they were in those early weeks. Fremantle certainly have improved, I think. What else can we say about these two teams? Obviously, Fremantle have won their last 4 games. They're in some fine form. Adelaide have lost 2 of their last 3. However, those 2 were both against North Melbourne, who are, without a doubt, the best team in the competition. So, I think you got to go the way of the Crows here, but I'm not as convinced as perhaps other people would be. That's how I see this first semi-final. Big game for both teams. Obviously, the winner of this one will be going up to Brisbane to play the Lions for a spot in the grand final. Adelaide are probably the better team, but at the same time, you can never really rule the Dockers out. So I'll be tipping the Crows, I think. I think we'll get to my tips in a minute, but that's the way I'll be going. Game number 2 is also Saturday, a few hours later at 7:30 Victorian time at Icon Park. It's Hawthorn Port Adelaide. Hawthorn going in big favourites, understandably so, but Port Adelaide in the best form almost in the AFLW outside of the Kangaroos. It's going to be a cracker. It's going to be interesting because for those that follow the AFL men's competition, these two teams met in a semi-final this year as well. So the men's and women's, Hawthorn, Port Adelaide, both semi-finals, same teams. Obviously that one was over at Adelaide Oval, whereas this one is a Hawthorn home game at Icon Park. But imagine the Hawthorn Hawks are certainly out to get their revenge, because there was a bit of spice in that game too. Hawthorn obviously had a bit of spice last week in their game against Brisbane. So it will be interesting, without a doubt, how this one plays out, because it's pretty interesting and pretty crazy that this is how it's played out, that they play each other. The history of these two teams, they haven't played this year yet. They did meet in round 9 last year, which was won by Hawthorn 6-4-40 to 5-2-32, and they did also meet in round 7 2022, the only two meetings. Hawthorn won that one 29 to 16. So 2-0 Hawks against Power. However, both teams this year better than any of Hawthorn or Port Adelaide in the history of the AFLW, without a doubt. This season, both teams flying. Hawthorn had won 4 in a row before they lost to Brisbane on the weekend. Meanwhile, Port Adelaide, I think, have won like 7 or 8 in a row now. I should have looked to get the exact number. Would have been the smart thing to do. I can still do that. Just give me maybe 2 seconds while I get to the right page. But from their start of the season, where they weren't bad. They lost week 1 against Adelaide, and then they smacked Bulldogs in week 2. Since their winning streak, so they lost to Richmond in their first game of week 5, and since then they've beaten Carlton, West Coast, Collingwood, St Kilda, Gold Coast, GWS, Richmond. So they've won 7 in a row. They're going for 8 wins in a row this weekend against Hawthorn. They'd never won 3 in a row in their history of the club before this year. So to win 8 or 7 at the moment in a row, to come from a team that didn't look like making finals. I did like them early season. If you go back to the early pods of the AFLW season, you will see that I have kind of been on their bandwagon for a bit, but I didn't expect them to go this well. So it would be huge for them if they were to get up over Hawthorn. It's going to be a tough ask, but it's certainly, I wouldn't put it past them, is what I'm saying, because they are 7 wins in a row. And I mean, not all of those against great teams, but they did beat Richmond. The rest of them haven't been spectacular, in all honesty. They did beat Gold Coast, GWS, Collingwood in that run, like the 3 bottom teams. But still, you can only beat the opposition you're playing. So I think you got to tip Hawthorn, in all honesty, but it would be huge if Port Adelaide won. So these are my tips for this weekend. First game, Adelaide, I think, are too strong for Fremantle. We're going with them by 15. And I think in an exact opposite of the men's semi-final, we're going Hawthorn by 3 points over Port Adelaide. So that is all the semi-final action previewed. That is all the week 1 finals action reviewed. I don't know if there's much else to say. AFLW squad, All Australian squad, has been announced over the last couple of days. So go check that out. I'm not going to go through it all here, but I will in maybe next week's episode have a look at that. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head when the All Australian team is announced for the AFLW season. But before it is, I'll try and get a video out of looking at that. We'll be back with the podcast early next week. The episode will go live probably either Monday or Tuesday for the AFL Men's Draft preview and off-season look. And then the AFLW Week 3 Finals, which will be looking at a review of the semi-finals and a preview of the prelim finals, will be going live Friday next week. So stick around, check that out. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any action. Hit the like button while you're here. Follow me on all my socials. Thanks for being here. We'll be back with episode 75 next week. This is All Aussie Rules. Thanks for tuning in.